Book nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Parents often mean well. They imagine steering their children toward the best schools, highest achievements, safest paths. But in The Self-Driven Child, Stixrud and Johnson show that this steering, the hovering, the micromanaging, the constant oversight, can come with a cost. What many children and teens suffer from most intensely isn't a lack of opportunities, but a sense that they have no real control over their lives. That perceived lack of control, they argue, undermines motivation, fuels anxiety, disrupts mental health, and weakens resilience. Through stories drawn from clinical work, coaching, neuroscience, and real family dilemmas, the authors build a case that giving children meaningful control, letting them make choices, bear consequences, and find their own path, can radically improve their well-being, their success, and their capacity to handle life's inevitable challenges. One of the first stories the authors tell is about a girl named Kara, around 12 or 13. Kara began suffering anxiety. She says she first noticed it when people around her kept telling her what to do, when she didn't feel she had control. She changed schools. Fitting in became harder. The sense of being at the mercy of schedules, expectations, other people's plans deepened her distress. What helped was when her parents shifted. Rather than dictating every hour, they asked her what she wanted, gave her choices. Giving Kara control, small but real, helped diminish her anxiety. Her story becomes emblematic for the rest of the book. When children feel powerless, even in tiny detail, stress follows. When they're trusted with agency, things shift toward growth. The authors show that intense pressure is everywhere. In competitive schools, heavy extracurricular loads, parental expectations, social media comparison, and a culture that often values outcomes over process. Many children are overburdened with scheduled time, with adults planning what they should do in every moment. This is control by others. Stixrud and Johnson contrast that with control by them, where children are involved, given decisions, asked for input, made responsible for parts of their lives. A vivid hypothetical case is of a girl named Zara, whose weekday schedule is rigid. Classes from morning to afternoon, after-school practice, volunteering, then hours of homework, weekends similarly packed. Her parents believe this will secure elite college placement. But Zara begins to suffer migraines, sleep deprivation, fights with parents. She feels squeezed. The authors argue that despite parents' good intentions, this overload and lack of self-control become toxic, not just in well-being, but in brain development, motivation, identity. They show that adolescents' brains, especially around ages 12 to 18, are still developing capacities for decision-making, self-regulation, and resilience. If everything is determined for them, they get no practice steering their own ship. Another story involves a boy called Jonah in the summaries, whose parents insist he do homework early every night, stopping video games first. Jonah complies on the surface. He sits at his desk, pretends to do the assignments, but in truth he dilly-dallies, killing time, avoids the work. He is not lazy or incapable. He is reacting to being controlled. When parents force behavior, the child often resists or disengages. Autonomy matters. The shift comes when his parents begin asking, "Do you have any assignments tonight that you want our help with? Want us to plan the evening so you can finish what's important first?" That small change, offering his voice and role in planning, makes a difference. Jonah gradually takes ownership. Even if at first he doesn't change immediately. Over time, his motivation increases. He begins to organize his time. He starts caring more about outcomes because they're not just imposed, but self-chosen. Beyond these vivid family stories, the book draws deeply on neuroscience. The authors explain how perceived control is not just a feel-good idea, but has concrete effects on stress responses, on the physiology of the brain, on learning and emotional regulation. They discuss how low perceived control activates threat circuits, elevates cortisol, disrupts sleep, and can lead to anxiety, depression, health issues. They also describe how high control or autonomy supports motivation, supports the development of the prefrontal cortex, which is critical for planning, decision-making, self-regulation. Part of what is unique in the self-driven child is how the authors bring together findings in neuropsychology with visible behavioral shifts in real children. The book also differentiates kinds of stress: positive stress, tolerable stress, toxic stress. Positive stress might be the butterflies before performance, the challenge of trying something new, the effort of mastering a skill. Tolerable stress is more serious, but buffered by supportive relationships and recovery time. Toxic stress is chronic, overwhelming, lacking the protective resources of autonomy or trusted adult support. The authors make clear that many children's lives include multiple small daily doses of toxic stress generated not by dramatic danger, but by subtle, constant lack of control, lack of sleep, overload of obligations, not being heard. The recovery days, unstructured time, autonomy over small decisions, rest, downtime. All of these are crucial, but often sacrificed in pursuit of getting ahead. One of the powerful techniques the authors recommend is giving kids choice, letting them decide where possible. Not every decision, but those that matter. For example, what extracurricular to pursue, when to do homework in evenings, within limits, which parts of assignments to start with, whether to walk to school, what classes or courses they might take. Not because parents lack concern about outcomes, but because choice builds internal motivation. When children make decisions themselves, they feel ownership. They invest in the outcome more deeply. When they succeed, it's not simply "I succeeded because someone told me to," but "I succeeded because I made that choice and followed through." When they make mistakes, they learn more deeply. When outcomes are not ideal, the sense of "I had a role in this" builds growth mindset. Another recurring theme is letting them face consequences. Parents often rush into rescue. Fix grades, smooth out conflicts, structure everything. But that robs kids of opportunities to manage setbacks. The authors show in multiple cases how sometimes the best gift parents can give is to step back, allow frustration, let the child live with a consequence. In one example, a student who missed deadlines under external pressure gets a lower grade. Rather than parents furiously protesting or doing extra work to save things, letting the natural consequence happen forced the student to reckon with what they valued, to reflect, to plan better for next time. Such moments build responsibility, self-awareness, self-efficacy. Sleep and rest are also emphasized heavily. The authors note many children, especially in demanding environments, are chronically underrested. Technology, late nights, shifting schedules, homework, social pressures interfere with proper sleep. Poor sleep worsens stress responses, undermines decision-making, clouds motivation, reduces capacity to regulate emotion. The book suggests concrete strategies: fixed bedtimes as much as possible, routines before bed, reducing screen time before sleep, allowing for adequate rest and downtime. Also, they bring up the value of radical digital downtime, periods without screens or social media to reset mental circuits, to allow space for reflection, boredom, daydreaming, all of which contribute to creativity, self-knowledge, emotional processing. Another set of examples deals with parents' own anxiety and how it seeps in. The authors argue that children pick up parents' emotional states, parents who are stressed, anxious, always pushing, enforcing. They transmit that into the home environment. Parents must cultivate their own calm presence. This doesn't mean being perfect, but being aware, regulating your response, stepping back, allowing yourself to model decision-making, admitting mistakes. When parents show that they don't know all the answers but believe in their child's capacity to choose, children feel more trust, more agency. Academic success is addressed too, but not as the only or even primary measure of child flourishing. The authors challenge the narrow framing that equates high grades, entrance to elite institutions, or performance on standardized measures with success. They show through examples that kids who follow their curiosity, who develop skills they care about, tend to sustain motivation more than ones targeted toward external rewards or parental expectations. They share stories of students who changed paths, switched majors, followed less traditional careers, yet found satisfaction, self-confidence, and performance when they felt ownership over what they were doing. The book is also practical in offering scripts for parents: how to say things differently, which questions to ask, how to shift from directive parenting, do this, to consultative or guiding. What do you think? How will you do that? Do you want help planning that? For instance, when children argue over homework, instead of shouting or commanding, the author suggests the parent might say, "I know you want good grades, and I want that too. What do you think is getting in your way?" Or, "Which of your assignments do you want to start with tonight?" Such conversational pivots preserve parental support while shifting decision power to the child. Another example, asking after mistakes, "What did you learn?" rather than "Why did you mess up?" or "How are you going to avoid this next time?" The language matters. Empathy, belief in capacity, focus on process rather than blame. An important insight is that children as young as 9 to 15 in many studies show decision-making ability closer to adults than typically assumed. In middle childhood and adolescence, many have sufficient capacities to weigh risks, preferences, foresee consequences. The authors don't discount developmental limitations, but they argue that parents often underestimate how much control children can and should hold. Allowing responsibility with guidance builds those decision-making muscles. They also explore how chronic lack of control can affect brain development, how in high stress, under sleep-poor conditions, with constant pressure, the brain's executive function weakens. Stress impairs working memory, self-regulation, emotional regulation. Over time, this fosters anxiety, burnouts, depression. So promoting autonomy isn't just about psychology, it's neurobiology. Giving children control over parts of their lives strengthens the neural circuits involved in regulating emotion, in assessing risk, in planning, in impulse control. Examples also encompass domains beyond school. Friendships, social life, free time, hobbies. These are places where children often are boxed in by parent or by schedule. The book recounts kids who, when allowed to make decisions in these areas, gain confidence, learn negotiation, manage disappointment, and often become more socially mature. For example, letting a teen pick their own summer activity rather than parent pick, or allowing them to manage part of their friendships or conflict with siblings. Parents stepping in only when safety, values, or ethics are involved, but otherwise letting children experiment, make mistakes, find boundaries themselves. One story involved a college-bound student whose parents had long dictated a rigorous schedule, filled with courses, activities, test prep, volunteer work. On arriving at college, the student felt unmoored, overwhelmed, lacking self-direction. Without prior practice in making choices, when nothing was scheduled, when nobody was forcing them to practice or monitor, they floundered. They hadn't developed internal driver. This gap is what Stixrud and Johnson call motivation trap, where external motivators, grades, awards, praise, have dominated so heavily that when external structure is removed, internal motivation is weak. The remedy: gradually shift towards self-driven work. Help the child choose their goals, plan them, manage them, let them own failures and adjustments. Throughout the book, there are practical, what you can do tonight type suggestions. Pick one decision your child doesn't currently make but could. Schedule a family meeting to ask what your child's priorities are and what small changes they'd like. Set up routines for sleep and technology with agreed-upon choices. Designate regular free time in which the child can spend unstructured time. In schoolwork, allow the child to decide order of homework tasks or choose when to tackle hardest versus easiest tasks. In mistakes, respond with curiosity, not judgment. In conflicts, show empathetic listening. Resist lecturing. The authors also emphasize that giving up some control as a parent does not mean chaos or abandonment. Boundaries still matter. Parents retain responsibility for safety, health, values. But within those boundaries, many decisions, many small moments can be theirs. Compliant versus self-driven is a spectrum. A well-set boundary system with agreed limits, plus real choices inside those limits, seems to work best. Another theme is recovery and rest. Kids need recovery from stress, not just downtime, but real rest, sleep, unstructured time, vacations, opportunity to recharge. Stress is cumulative. Recovery is not optional. When children do not have recovery, the stress overload undermines resilience, damages mental health, undermines learning capacity. The authors tell of kids whose academic loads, social pressures, tech distractions left them chronically stressed, sleep-deprived, anxious. Interventions aimed at fixing sleep, reducing commitments, reducing screen time, creating predictable routines often produce measurable improvements in mood, performance, well-being. They also tackle the technology question: devices, social media, constant stimulation. The book suggests parents model healthy tech use, set technology-free times, spaces for unplugging, allowing children to choose when to use phones, but within guidelines, to decide break times, to have accountability, to design alternative activities. Tech overload often takes away control by flooding attention, creating expectations of immediacy, interfering with sleep and reflection. Restoring control in tech use is part of restoring autonomy overall. The authors discuss high-stress environments. For example, students in very competitive private schools or highly driven families. In those settings, pressure to outperform, to get into elite universities, to maintain high GPA, to juggle multiple elite extracurriculars can create vicious cycles. Parents want their children to have every possible opportunity. But when children are forced into a relentless schedule, with little say, the stress tends to erode the very motivation it's intended to build. The book cites cases where students reporting high achievements also report high anxiety, depression, perfectionism, burnout. The authors argue that to protect motivation and mental health, it's vital to balance challenge with autonomy, performance with rest, high expectations with choice. In the final parts of the book, Stixrud and Johnson look ahead. What does it look like to raise self-driven children who can navigate adulthood, who can steer themselves when external structure falls away, when school ends, when job expectations shift, when life presents ambiguity? They argue that early experiences of autonomy, responsibility, decision-making, failure, recovery build exactly that capacity. Children who have been trusted with choices, allowed to make mistakes, allowed to fail and recover, tend to carry stronger self-confidence, better stress tolerance, more ability to take risks, and more intrinsic motivation. They are better equipped to choose vocations, navigate relationships, set priorities, and shape lives in alignment with what matters to them, not just what others expect. The authors acknowledge there are trade-offs and challenges. Mistakes will happen. Children will sometimes make poor choices. Parents will need patience. Boundaries will need clarity. There sometimes are cultural, socioeconomic constraints. Some kids have individual differences, neurodiversity, anxiety, ADHD, etc., that require tailored approaches. But they emphasize these are not reasons to avoid giving control. They are reasons to do so more carefully, more thoughtfully. In sum, the self-driven child argues that perhaps the most important gift parents can give is not the perfect plan or unending structure, but the opportunity to steer one's own path. Letting children come into ownership of their lives, teaching them to make choices, bearing consequences, managing technology, valuing rest, resisting perfectionism, lowering overt control. All of these contribute to better mental health, stronger motivation, deeper resilience. The road isn't easy. It's hard for parents to loosen grip, to resist anxiety, to trust. But the examples show that when done well, this shift can unlock joy, growth, responsibility, and confidence in children in ways that heavy-handed parental effort often fails to achieve. And that's it. The Self-Driven Child: The Science and Sense of Giving Your Kids More Control Over Their Lives by William Stixrud and Ned Johnson. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.